There we go.
We on? We good?
I think we're on.
Yep. We are good to go. Yo.
What's up, man? Been a while.
Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by Lopaka Kapanui from Mysteries of Hawaii and Sean Fitzsimmons. You guys can kind of do introductions if you guys like. Just kind of.
Go ahead.
I guess I'll go first.
Sure.
My name is Sean Fitzsimmons. I became acquainted with Nate through a class I was teaching as a substitute for. And we got into talking, and I currently work as an attorney in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Awesome.
Lopaka Kapanui, owner of Mysteries of Hawaii. And basically I take people to haunted places and scare the living heck out of them.
It's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was in class. If you don't know, not really that important, but I go to UH West Oahu, and I got this substitute teacher in class, right? And it's Sean. At the end of class, everybody leaves out, or just about everybody leaves out, and Sean's like, "I need you to stay." I'm sitting on the front row, and I'm just like, holy shit, what is going on? I was scared, man. I was like, oh my god, what did I do now, you know? And anyways, because like, oh, I need you to proctor the exam next week or whatever, because our regular teacher was going to be out again. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Anyway, well, one thing kind of led to another, and we started talking about the podcast, and here we are today. So thank you very much for coming out, Sean. I'm glad you could make it.
Yeah, of course, man. No worries.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah, this is fun. I've been wanting to, I went on Lopaka's tours a few months ago, and it was fun, man. It was awesome. Everything that you took us to so many places. We went on the Poly tour,
Okay.
and we was there with my friend Namaka and Evie and all them. So, bruh, I just had such a good time on that one. You're such a good
appreciate it.
storyteller.
Thank you.
Now, do you have anything that you guys are anything new as far as tours go?
We're actually on May 26th doing a haunted Honolulu crime tour.
Okay.
And so we're going to go to the courthouse behind the Kamehameha statue and discuss the Massey trial and the trial of Miles Fukunaga,
Ooh.
which kind of weirdly ties into the Barinui Sugi case, the Xerox murders.
Yeah.
And then we're going to walk over to the post office that has some things going on, and a couple of interesting places in 4th Street Mall discussing some old and recent crimes that sort of have a tie-in with each other. It's almost like the crime is still perpetuating itself, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You want to maybe expand a little bit on the Massey case? I think I've read a little bit of Hawaiian history. I'm no expert, but this is the case back in the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken, right? Was it a white lady that accused a Hawaiian kid of raping or some such? Maybe you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, that was 1931-32. I'll give you the abridged version. Wife of a naval officer claimed that she was beaten and raped by 5 local boys, and it went to trial. Ended up being a hung jury because 6 were for, 6 were against. And the boy, Joseph Kahavai, was kidnapped right in front of the Supreme Court building by the woman's husband and 2 enlisted men. And they took him, Joseph Kahavai, to a house in Manoa that belonged to Thalia Massey's mother, Grace Fortescue, and they tied him to a chair, tried to beat a confession out of him. He said he didn't do it, and somebody got frustrated and shot him. Everybody knows it was actually one of the enlisted men that did it, but for the sake of the case, Clarence Darrow was the person representing them and told him it's better if you say that the husband did it, you know, because it's an honor killing. People will understand.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
They also castrated him, the boy, and wrapped his body up in a sheet. They're going to dump him in the blowhole at Hanoma Bay. But I think the call had been put out because people witnessed the kidnapping. And so an officer, a Hakuelo, a motorcycle officer, saw the car, pulled it over, found the body. The ghost part of it comes in is people believe that the ghost of Joseph Kahavai still haunts that museum courtroom today.
Jesus, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah, now the lady in that trial eventually admitted to everything, right?
Yeah, after everything. But because of that, the Masseys and the enlisted men were going to be convicted, 10 years hard labor. But it was a tense situation. The admiral of the Naval Pacific Command told Governor Judd, if you don't commute the sentence, I'm going to declare martial law. And again, the abridged version, what happens is the Massies spend, as their punishment, an hour in the office of Governor Judd sipping tea. And then they go to have a Chinese dinner a couple blocks down. And the next day, I think they're on the Lurleen, the steam line, and they're gone.
Holy shit.
And that's it.
And that's it, right?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. Now, that case in particular had long-lasting effects in the Hawaii judiciary, if I'm not mistaken. I can't expand on it any more than that, really just kind of based on what I've read, but that's definitely some interesting stuff, very unfortunate. What else you got going on, Lopaka?
In June, I have the Glen Grant Memorial Tour, and I even forget what year it is, if it's the 15th or 15th annual since his passing, 2003. And so it's a 2-day memorial tour. The Friday night, June 15th, I hope that's the right date, is the Urban Legends of Oahu tour. And the second night is sort of more of a VIP tour, and that's going to take place out in Waianae.
Wow.
Yeah, because that was Glenn's favorite ghost tour to do. I still don't know why until today, because it's such an active place, and if I have certain types of people who come on that tour who have unresolved personal issues, things happen to them.
Yeah, I noticed on our tour you had asked anybody, do you have any making sure everybody's like mentally sound, right?
Yeah.
Before they go on a tour, because a lot of people get messed up,
Yeah, there's just stuff out there that identifies with whatever trauma the living person is going through, and they make this association. Strangely enough, especially for people who've experienced some sort of abuse or have problems that have been passed down in a family, just things start to happen. So for the sake of liability, because we have this this guy here.
There you go.
Yeah. I called Allstate and I said, hey, do you guys have a policy for, in case somebody gets possessed on my tour or something? They're like, well,
I think that's excluded under your policy.
That's actually a good question. Yeah.
No, I don't think you can buy like an appropriate endorsement to cover such a liability, but it's good that you're thinking.
It was worth it because that's how bad things were getting.
Yeah.
So we kind of stopped doing it. We just do it periodically, not every Saturday like we used to do.
What kind of ghosts are in the Supreme Court, if you don't mind me asking? Well, I mean, how does that the ghost of that victim manifest itself?
Well, that's the funny thing. After much research, my late boss Glenn Grant found this newspaper article that when they were burying the body of Joseph Kahavai at Puea Cemetery by the Kamehameha School's bus stop, the article says, as the coffin is being lowered, the father of the victim calls out to his son in Hawaiian and says, "My son, do not remain as an angry spirit. Go to your rest. When my time comes, I'll take your place."
Wow.
Yeah, so it sort of seems like it's actually the dad that's there. And according to people who work in that building, they say the other ghosts are the ghosts of the old judges, who still hang out.
Well, I'm definitely interested in getting a lot more in depth on all that stuff. Sean, if you don't mind, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself. And, obviously you're a lawyer. Maybe you can tell us about your education. I know that's a long commitment.
Yeah.
How'd you deal with that?
It was definitely not not planned out. I went to University of Hawaii, but after high school I wanted to play football, and so I tried to get a scholarship to a 4-year school. So I went to Long Beach City College. Didn't work out. Obviously, I'm not a football player anymore, but decided to pursue English at University of Hawaii. Transferred there. Majored in poetry of all things, and fell in love with writing. After graduating, I moved to LA to be a poet. So I worked as a headhunter from 9 to 5 to make money, and would try to write and didn't make any money doing that.
Wow.
And I got kind of tired of living the paycheck to paycheck life, so I just decided to take try to apply to law school, and I got in there. Went to University of Dayton. Spent some time at in the juvenile as a public defender in the public defender's office in Montgomery County, working with the kids there. Developed like a real love for the profession. Moved back home and got hired as a job. Got hired in Hawaii as an attorney and going forward ever since.
Right on.
I guess so.
Well, the university, where was that located?
University of Dayton in Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Which is in Montgomery County, and the most interesting thing about that, it was the epicenter, which still is the epicenter of the opioid epidemic.
Yeah.
And so, working in the public defender's office, I got to see firsthand how crazy that was. They were so inundated with cases, even in the juvenile divisions, that they were having all of us take all these cases as law students, and we would defend. Like a lot of these kids that were caught up as a result of the opioid epidemic. A lot of these kids, like, they didn't have parents because they're on the streets, hooked on heroin and all sorts of stuff. The mom, like, being a prostitute, the dad being a drug dealer, and it's terrible stuff. But getting thrown into the mix, you get to really, really understand how the legal system works and how sometimes it's not the fairest of things for some kids, depending on what color your skin is, honestly seeing. But it is good. It was a good experience, and it's something I'll take with me for the rest of my life, definitely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about, I guess, because you were talking about the opioid crisis and heroin. In your opinion, do you think the war on drugs is working? And how would you kind of change it?
That's so loaded.
It is.
But like, I think,
Thanks for being honest.
No, but it's so weird to me because I think, like, there's the approach that you want to maintain a prohibition on drugs or regulation of drugs for safety, which is totally a valid concern.
Sure.
However, there's the other side of it where it's like, there's like religious or other motivations that attempt to legislate laws onto other people, like
taking away personal freedoms and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, if you're not hurting anybody.
Exactly. So these things kind of run into direct conflict. And so my personal opinion is that, if you're not hurting anybody, you shouldn't be really prosecuted for anything.
Yeah.
And I don't think the war on drugs is effectively working. I think it's kind of just moving the problem around.
Yeah.
Now, I think, as we've all seen, like, prescription drugs have been the new issue, and like now kids are getting hooked on these like benzodiazepines and all these Xanax pills and all these other things and the ADD meds and all sorts of stuff. So so I think just the problem is just moving it around,
Yeah, and I don't think they're really attacking the problem how they should be right now. They're kind of punishing the patients.
Yes.
Even though the doctors are the ones that are either prescribing, or the system's not a federal system where it's like and I don't even know if I agree with that necessarily, having like a national database of prescription. That goes into little hairy. I'm libertarian, by the way. So,
No,
so just I'm for like all freedoms, more privacy.
Yeah, definitely.
But sound.
Right.
It has to be.
Yeah, it's
Makes
weird.
sense.
Yeah, it's weird. You have to like register. Right, for marijuana, right, you have to register you have to get your name out on a registry to get like a prescription or something, and that could be like prohibitive to some people with professional backgrounds that don't want to be associated or have a public record of them.
And if you have a medical marijuana license, I don't even think you can own a gun.
Yeah, those things don't seem. I don't see like stoners shooting up schools.
Exactly. It's crazy.
I see marijuana as like the BB gun, versus AR-15s and shotguns and stuff. And I think my biggest problem with the whole war on drugs is the amount of money we're spending on it. And some of that is justified, obviously, when you're talking about the real tough or hard stuff.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know, I have numbers in front of me or anything, but just the amount of money we're spending on the courts involved with the whole marijuana cases, it's absurd. I've been watching a few documentaries. Hopefully they were truthful or whatever. But man, it's crazy. And I think another consideration is the amount of time, the time that the courts spend on marijuana cases.
Yep.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I think that's it's weird when federally something is illegal, but certain states have it have it legislated as a legal item, the marijuana does. But you were talking about like how drugs and like the enforcement of the laws are like not really the most fair or just, right? And we were talking earlier before the podcast about how that actually manifested earlier in the misapplication of sentencing for for people who are caught with powder cocaine versus crack cocaine.
Yep.
Right. It was crazy. In 2010, I just wrote a little note here. Congress passed the Fair Sentencing Act, which reduced the sentence disparity between offenses for crack and powder cocaine from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1. Right. What the 100 to 1 ratio meant that people faced longer sentences for involving crack cocaine than for offenses involving the same amount of powder cocaine, which is the same drug.
Yeah.
Because the majority of people arrested for crack cocaine were black. And the 100 to 1 ratio resulted in a vast disparity in average length of sentences for comparable offenses. So what you end up getting is like these non-violent minority offenders getting caught up in the system for just as long as violent non-minority offenders.
Sure.
And so this misapplication of laws, as you were saying earlier, is manifest already in that example. So.
Yeah, and I think that's absurd. You know, I'm just a normal guy. I couldn't tell you anything about the difference, besides the obvious, the difference between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. I don't even know what crack cocaine is, to the common person, though, it's like, well, if it's the same thing, why aren't you sentencing the same, right? Why don't the same law apply? And it's just absurd. Something that bothers me, that has always bothered me, I'm not really one of those guys that fall into these race traps all the time, but it's pretty obvious to an extent that race does play a part in the judicial system. Maybe not directly, but it's more geographical, maybe, where maybe there's court systems and locations that's more minority heavy, for lack of better words.
Sure.
So what do you do about it? I don't know. Besides objective judges, maybe you can explain a little bit more.
Yeah, objectivity is definitely not race-based. Someone can be objective regardless of their background, but I think perhaps the issue is like when the offender or the defendant is in place, and the judges are always of a different background socioeconomically. I think maybe it's more of a socioeconomic issue than a race issue. And where if the juries aren't a reflection of the background of the defendant, then perhaps you get these disparate treatments.
Sure.
And a way to eliminate that would be maybe having a more similar or congruous system as the defendant.
Right.
Or administrators of the system as the defendant to maybe kind of assuage whatever disparities that would come across. I would see personally, honestly, in the juvenile section, there would be these white kids that would be setting things on fire and committing obvious arson with crazy. These kids were crazy repeat offenders, and they would get constantly slaps on the wrists from this one judge in particular. Then they would get sent to these facilities where they would just have to check in for the day, but they weren't made to do anything crazy. And then there'd be these minority kids who got into a fight at school once, and they'd be sentenced to lockdown facilities 24 hours a day. So basically kid jail. And the statistics show once you get sent to that level of confinement as a juvenile, the recidivism rate, the meaning the propensity for you to commit more crimes is multiplied by a factor of hugely. So that right there just shows how one decision could affect the course of someone's life
forever.
Yeah, forever basically.
It's insane.
Yeah. Well, even in Hawaii, as far as I'm not sure, Lopaka, I don't know if you have any insight onto this, but with the Massey trial you're mentioning earlier, all the administrators of the trial were not Hawaiian, right? Is that
right?
Correct? And the police officer that finally uncovered the case, Ahakuela, was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that even the vestiges of such disparities
That's a good point.
Back in the Massey case.
Yeah.
Even the vehicle that belonged to Horace Ito, some of the police officers took that vehicle to the spot where they say, Talia Massey was beaten and raped. And they took his car and drove it back and forth, to leave the tire tracks.
Oh my God.
To sort of implicate him,
That's insane.
Yeah, I'm interested. Kind of going back to some of the drug side of things. You know, there's this argument where, and you hear it all the time, weed is a gateway drug, and I never really kind of believe that. You know, maybe it is for some people, but maybe what are your thoughts on that, Sean?
Well, one thing, I think the reason people think it's a gateway drug is because there's a black market for it, and the same person you get your weed from is the same person that's probably selling coke, and probably selling pills, and so it just leads to one thing to another at that same dealer. You know what I mean? They're like, not every dealer is selling everything, but a lot of dealers sell at least more than one thing, you know, and so that's typically where the correlation where I've seen. Where it seems like a gateway drug.
Right. I wonder what the profit margin is on weed versus crack or whatever, you know. So using your logic, which I think is a very great point, if that same drug dealer is saying, hey, you know, go for this crack or heroin or whatever, maybe it costs a little bit more, maybe they make a little bit more money.
Well, they've been doing things like a thing called cocoa bombs, where they mix cocaine with their weed, and so they get people physically hooked on cocaine when they don't even know it.
Jesus. How do you know about all this?
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff.
I'm joking with you. Anyway, Sean, if you want to chime in on your thoughts.
I don't think it's a gateway drug at all, to be honest.
Thank you.
I think it's more of a medicine, and it sucks that it's still like scheduled in a way where it can't be really medically researched to the extent that it should be. Mm-hmm. Even cocaine, right? Like, cocaine was initially introduced as a medicine by Freud. Freud became a cokehead because he was doing lines while encouraging people to be more gregarious, right? Like, you're like, this stuff makes people talk more. Like, let's give it.
And there was trace amounts even in the drinks. They were selling it, like going town to town and selling it in drinks too. At the time.
Cocaine was actually like one of the original ingredients in Coca-Cola.
It was.
Yeah. So it's definitely been.
It's just so crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. But I think marijuana in and of itself is not a gateway drug per se. I think when people are gonna do what they want to do, regardless of what they've tried before. Yeah. And you know, it's who they look up to, their surroundings, their their means, you know, these type of things. Like, I think these correlations, the slippery slope argument has long been known as a red herring argument. Like, oh well, if you do this and this is going to happen and that's going to happen, it's not true. There's no real correlation. There's no transitive like property that if someone smokes marijuana, if it was a slippery slope argument, then there'd be a correlation between marijuana smokers and, like, you know, people that shoot up heroin or something, right. and there isn't really. Yeah. So yeah, to long answer is
and zero recorded deaths of anybody who's you can't OD on you know I mean you can OD on marijuana, but you're not gonna die. You're gonna fall asleep or.
Yeah, just eat cheeseburgers or something.
I think he had a point on the.
The other factor in all of this is, you know, family members who either enable or completely ignore.
It's huge.
You know, they've got 11-year-old grandchildren who are, you know, doing crack and marijuana, and they completely ignore it. But, you know, things get so bad, you know, little 11-year-old girl has to go to court for doing drugs, getting busted, you know, stealing granddad's car, taking it for a drive. You know, but in all of that, I've myself have witnessed family members sort of dealing with the problem, but not really.
Right.
You know, they'd rather ignore it and just pretend that everything's okay. And that's sort of an epidemic in a lot of families. And the other thing is, people believe there's a demographic for persons who do crack or cocaine, and they always believe it's, you know, the dredge of society. Right. But a couple of years ago, bought a brand new GMC Yukon, went to Manoa McDonald's, decided to go park outside the Manoa Chinese Cemetery, just sit and eat it. And this police car cruises by a couple of times, and then I'm done. And I drive back down Manoa, and it's right behind me, like chases me all the way to McDonald's, and I pull over. And I asked him, I said, did I do anything wrong? He says, well, you're kind of suspicious. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you don't see Hawaiian guys driving nice cars up here in Manoa. I'm like, are you serious?
Really?
Yeah. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
But then when I mentioned the place where I was sitting to eat my McDonald's to a friend of mine, he goes, well, you know that the caretaker's home at the cemetery at the bottom? I said, yeah. It's like, well, you know, they're known drug dealers, so maybe that's what it was. Oh. And their clientele are affluent people.
Right.
You know.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
there you go.
Yeah.
High rollers kind of.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
people who live in New Valley and Coolio, those kind of people.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
In the judicial system, Sean, maybe you can tell me a little bit more about this because I don't know how judges are appointed. I know some of them are political appointees, but for the average judge in your low courts, how are they appointed?
I think they are appointed by the. Well, I know they have to be confirmed. I'm not sure exactly, to be honest.
Yeah, and I guess the reason I bring it up is because I guess maybe more so, maybe this is more pertinent to the Supreme Court, right, where it's essentially political appointees where if a Republican governor or president or whatever is going to appoint someone who leans that way, right?
Yeah, I think I know I was involved in one case where one appointee where I think it was Linda Lingle appointed a female judge to the Supreme Court, and the Hawaii State. Okay, the process for that I know is that there's a confirmation that the Hawaii State Bar Association has to confirm the political appointee by the governor, and then that has. But I'm not sure if there's the opinion of the Hawaii State Bar Association just influences the legislature voting for the confirmation, but I'm not sure if the Hawaii State Bar has an actual say. But with this particular appointee, it was I think it was a judge by the last name of Leonard, and she was appointed by Lingle, and it appeared to be a political appointment based off of her gender, I think, and not her qualifications. And the HSBA did not find her qualified to sit on to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court because her qualifications were, I think, not up to snuff. So because of that, they made a recommendation that they did not feel she was competent. And I think because of that, she was not confirmed.
Yeah, and that's amazing. Okay. I guess the reason I bring it up is because it goes back to the argument where, if you have one judge here and another judge there, and they're basically trying the same case, you can end up with two completely different, I don't know the terminology, verdicts or decisions.
That's more the jury, man. If you're talking about criminal stuff, you're gonna go to jury mostly, and then when you go to a jury, it's you're convicted or exonerated by the opinions of your peers.
Sure.
And so yes, you could have varying results on verdicts, but that's more of a product of the varying social, ethnic and sociological tapestries of the juries, perhaps, than it is.
So the judge is just there to keep the lawyers in line.
Yeah, the judge is the administrator, just keeping the rules of the. If you think of a trial is like a football game, the judge is like the referee, and they're not there to really interpose themselves as much as they are to make sure the rules of the court are obeyed, and people don't get out of line and stuff.
Can a judge, I guess, make a judgment outside of the jury, or is it? That
can happen too. There could be egregious. In rare instances, there could be findings that don't support the evidence that are so clear that the judge vacates the verdict and stuff. But I think those are few and far between. But the judge does have the power to declare a verdict to be not reflective of the evidence. But I think the whole point of the judicial system is to be not judged by one person, but by a collectivity of your peers.
Yeah.
So bias on behalf of any particular judge doesn't have a huge role in most cases.
Well, in sentencing, perhaps, but not unless you talk about mandatory minimum sentencing or whatever. But I think the sentencing stuff is where the judges kind of come into play a lot more. But as far as whether someone's guilty or not, that's a product of the jury.
Right.
So the jury would essentially convict the person or say that they're guilty of or not guilty, right?
Yes.
And then the judge carries out the sentencing after, based on what they feel is fits the crime or.
Generally, yeah. I think generally. There's like exceptions to where like there's like statutory minimum sentencing for certain cases for
Right.
certain types of crimes and stuff where
Yeah.
like certain the sentence is like a minimum, but generally yes.
Yeah.
So since we have Lopaka here with us today, and we were just talking about this before the show, trying to figure out how we're going to tie in these two subjects, but there's a great correlation where, just a rough example I threw out was like, somebody may have murdered another person based on thinking that they saw a ghost or some paranormal activity or whatever, right? Which is not an uncommon thing, right? So
Yeah.
I guess generally speaking, what are your thoughts on something like that, Lopaka?
A lot of times I do get calls from people who believe, their house is haunted by what they say is a person that the realtor or the landlord claimed either died in the house or committed suicide or was murdered. But that's actually not factual. Whether or not those things happen doesn't have to do with the house. It actually has to do with the kind of people who live in the house. And that's where the big mistake is made. One person told me, every place I've lived and worked, it's always been haunted. I don't know what it is. And I had to explain to her, it's you.
She's got an attachment.
Yeah. She has a certain level of psychic sensitivity that sort of opens her up to particular kinds of energies, no matter where she lives or where she works. And she couldn't accept it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, 90% of the time, it's a people problem. It's not a house or an office problem. It's all people-based. There was a guy, according to the book that Gary Diaz wrote, Honolulu Cop, a Filipino guy that was murdered in the basement of his own home by his wife's boyfriend. And they hid the body and claimed that he disappeared. But Gary Diaz says that one of his officers, when they went to investigate the basement, saw the ghost of the Filipino guy pointing to a wall. And Gary Diaz says, police officers are not trained to believe those kinds of things, but he followed a hunch, and I think they opened up the wall, and that's where they found the body.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
And if you know Gary Diaz, I highly respect him. He wrote a couple of great books, but in person, no personality.
Yeah.
Just everything's a yes and no answer, and that's it. But he had to be that way because of how invasive the news stations were back then.
Right.
He had to sort of dial it back, and that's one case that had the ocular proof for one officer, and that sort of solved the murder, the ghost of the guy who was murdered in his own home.
So the lady that you told was, hey, it's you, it's not the house.
Yeah.
And how did she take that? Was she offended by that?
She was greatly offended because she was a believer in a lot of flighty things, so all of her influence and her satisfaction came from external influences. She had no real belief in herself. So when I was trying to explain to her, you have this gift, it's actually you, she just wouldn't accept it.
That's so interesting, and without getting into me too much personally, I guess I can kind of vouch for that in a way, because I never really was this hugely religious person, more or less, but I'd say that I followed Christianity, somewhat, but along with religion comes certain types of psyches, I guess you want to call them that, certain ways of thinking. Well, I kind of, a certain point in time ago, I kind of detached myself from religion per se, not to say I'm not a religious person or whatever, but once I got rid of that sort of attachment to myself, I guess the way that I saw things kind of changed, and I would say I have experienced some paranormal activity in the past, and just the way that I thought before is different now, and I don't get those same types of thoughts. That's a little bit simplistic, I guess, but I can kind of understand that.
Yeah, my cousin works at the juvenile facility here at Couple A, and he says, these kids who come in, they come with their personal problems from home, but he says whenever there's activity in that facility, he says he notices it feeds off the energy of these kids who have these problems. And so I explained to him, that's a clear explanation of poltergeist activity. Because poltergeists can't act independently, they need a human agent, and oftentimes it's a highly emotionally disturbed teenager, who's going specifically through family problems. So in 2006, I was getting a lot of calls from Ocean Point, because people's houses were having problems, and no matter what their explanation was, I would always ask them, "Do you have a teenager in your home?" Yeah. So what's happening with him? You know, is he aloof? Is he being bullied, or does he feel like you guys are not listening to him? And you know, about 90% of the time, the answer was, yeah. You know, he's dialed out. You know, just doesn't want to be part of the family. So I said, "Do you ever notice that when these things happen, if he's in the room?" And a lot of them said, "Yeah, when it happens, he's actually here. But when he's not here, it doesn't happen." You know.
Sorry, I got goosebumps thinking about that.
Which leads me to a question I have for you, sir.
Okay.
You know, with all of the cases you've been involved in, have there been a few cases that have really bothered you and made you question, like, the morality of human nature? You know?
Well, like, okay, so just to put out there, I'm like been an attorney for a year, so I'm not like Mr. like Johnny Cochran or whatever, but
Right.
and my field right now is insurance defense, so it's the like kind of the like whenever there's like a lawsuit against a business or something, they send the claim to their insurance carrier, and to see the carrier determines if it's covered, and pursuant to your policy, the carrier has an obligation to provide a legal defense for your case. And yeah, there was one case most recently, actually went to the neighbor island for, and unfortunately this girl, she fell out of like a very high story window. I think it was about 70 feet. She landed on her back, you know, and like, there's an issue of whether or not there was negligence it was like a short-term vacation rental issue, and you know, it was whether or not the owner of the short-term vacation rental like properly made sure that the premises was safe for, you know, the next tenant. And the way she fell out the window was crazy. And you know, thankfully she's you know, she didn't pass away. She's still alive. But you know, it's crazy to think that, you know, like that's, you know, as far as disturbing goes, like, you know, she, you know, like as far as she was like trying to just be a kid, and she like just fell out the door, you know, and fell out the window, and you know, it's disturbing to me. But I don't know if there's going to be any like poltergeist activity, like, or if she's going to become a vehicle for you know, for a ghost, which was like kind of interesting to me. You mentioned like, you know, poltergeists like seek like a vehicle to inhabit, and I was wondering like what qualities of like a person are attractive for like a poltergeist to like attach themselves to, because I know nothing about this stuff, and this is like really interesting to me.
Normally, it's a young person who, you know, we're all teenagers, and I'm sure at one time we all felt our parents didn't understand us. But some young people, their lives are to the point where they feel like they're being emotionally repressed, that they can't really be who they want to be, or they feel that their parents are not going to understand that, you know, they're living an alternative lifestyle secretly.
Sure.
And according to a lot of documented studies in the Institute of Parapsychology at John F. Kennedy University, sometimes those feelings are so intense and the person can't really act out or say the things they want, that it manifests through their subconscious. And so it's actually really them making the cups move, making the laptop, you know, fall off the table. But it's also a poltergeist, like I said, that's present, that senses this, and that's the human agent.
So, okay, so you're like, so Lopaka, you have this, it seems like you have a broad understanding of like just paranormal activity as a whole.
Right.
But you're centralized. You have a very deep understanding in Hawaii's specific history. Do you see any overlap between how Hawaii ghosts and the Hawaii paranormal, you know, night marchers and these types of things? Is there any parallel between that and like your understanding of like Western paranormal activity? Are they the same? Because for me, honestly, like there's like so many things about Hawaii that's so insane. Like, okay, you know, like, okay, so you know, like there's like this like locals versus haoles thing, like damn haoles, like, but like these like really like if you go into like Maui or Kauai, you know, these guys are like hunters, they drive pickup trucks, you know, they love to go fishing, you know, like they'd be best friends with dudes in the Midwest, redneck dudes, they love the same stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like maybe there's some overlap in the paranormal activity too. You know, like
That's funny, because a lot of local people who are born and bred locals really identify with the, you know, people from you know, the Ozarks or from Virginia, because it's a basic same morality, same way they grow up. You know, it's almost like the same values. You know, you eat everything that's on the plate.
Yeah.
Because you may not have another meal tomorrow, and you absolutely revere your mother.
yeah.
You know, because your mother's the center of the household, and similarities like, don't sweep the house at night and don't whistle in the dark.
Yep.
And even for Hawaiians, before we had cemeteries, if we had to bury you, we'd mark your spot with a tree, and they do that in the South.
Oh, they grow like a sapling or something? Or...
No, it's like if you pass away, we go bury you somewhere.
Uh-huh.
We plant like a sapling or maybe your favorite tree on top of you.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that's your grave marker.
That's interesting.
The weirdest thing I ever heard, I don't know if I told this to you guys the night you came, but I forget where this guy worked. It was an office in downtown Honolulu, but the abridged version is they hired a girl from, I think he said it was from Georgia. And he said, beautiful Holly girl, and all the guys were hitting on her, trying to take her out. And, he said, I was just too busy with what I had to do. And he said one night he's leaving the parking structure, and she just bought a brand new Audi. And she's got the hood up, and, she's looking, and he was telling himself, I really shouldn't stop. I should just drive and not even do this. But he stops. She says, I don't know what's wrong with it. Brand new car, brand new battery, won't start. So he tried to jump it. It wouldn't start. He couldn't see that she actually had disconnected the battery. So she told him, would you mind taking me to my yoga class and just wait for me afterwards and, bring me home and then, we can come back. And so he did that, waited for her, came back, helped her start the car and all this stuff. And he said the next day at work, she came up to his cubicle and had this Tupperware full of spaghetti noodles and spaghetti sauce. And she said, it's a custom where I come from that we thank people, and normally we thank people with food. So she said, this is our family recipe. And he said at that point he had no inkling to like her or be in a relationship with her. He said, but once a month, toward the end of the month, she would feed him, the family recipe, the spaghetti sauce and the noodles. And he fell madly in love with her.
Wow.
Like his world revolved around her. And this went on for a couple of months, end of the month, the spaghetti sauce and the noodles. And one day his boss sends him to a hotel in Denver, Colorado, because he's got to read all these grants and approve and all this stuff. And he said, every day that he was there, he kept asking himself slowly, why did I like her? Why am I in love with her? And so when he told me this, he says, when I came back home, I didn't tell her I was coming back home. And he said, actually, right now, I'm at a hotel at the airport, and I'm trying to figure out how to get my stuff and just, move out of state, because this is weird. I don't know why I liked her. I don't know why, we hooked up.
Yeah.
And I said, so, spaghetti sauce and noodles, like, the end of every month? He says, yeah. I said, there's an old voodoo practice in the South where, if a Southern woman likes you and wants you to be hers completely, they give you this spaghetti sauce with the noodles. But there's an ingredient in it. He says, oh my God, it's not chicken blood in it. I said, no, it's actually her blood. Yeah.
Filthy. Oh no, like the period blood.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And so it's part of that
That's
voodoo
straight
incantation with the chicken and all that stuff
That's
that they
heavy.
do.
Oh man,
Yeah.
heavy flow, man.
But
That is heavy.
but the funny thing is, in ancient times, and this was passed down in my family from the Big Island, when a woman had her period, she had to be separated, and it was considered a time of defilement.
Yep.
But if there's a guy that she didn't like and she wanted him done away with, she'd go,
Yeah.
do the deed with him.
Yeah.
And if somebody found out, what she would say, this guy did it against my will, and they find him to kill him.
Oh wow.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's
Jesus.
wow.
That's crazy.
What can you tell us about, my wife is from Wahiawa, and all they talk about, well, not all they talk about, they always bring it up, the green lady,
Yep.
and I couldn't tell
yep.
you any more than that, but she talks
the
about it
river.
all the time.
So maybe you've come across these cases too. I know you've only been around for years as your capacity as an attorney, but the green lady is actually what they call a mo'owahine,
Okay.
and her place is actually in Lake Wilson.
Yep.
And so you remember these cases where they would find bodies of guys in Lake Wilson, drowned,
Floating, yep.
floating. So the detail about that is when they found them, they'd be fully clothed, wallet, cell phone, car key in the pocket, and they said it's almost like the guy just got out of the car and just walked into the lake, of his own free will and accord. I was at a storytelling festival, a pineapple festival in Wahiawa, and a woman told me the story of Kanoi, and it's a goddess that comes down from the Kaala Mountains every few years, and she goes to Lake Wilson, and she has to take a few male victims, before she goes back, and she always appears as a beautiful woman and lures them into the lake, for a swim.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes, pussy's a powerful thing, man. It's making you drown. It's like, I get this woman at the bottom of this lake.
It certainly turns you into one, because that's
And
how you
guys,
end up
man.
dead.
They don't give a fuck. They're like, I'm down. Let's go in the lake. This is dirty as shit.
Maybe all the guys that were like found drowned in Lake Wilson were like super hard up.
Yeah,
never,
yeah.
never had a girlfriend yet.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, a young military guy. It's a Saturday night,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is kind of off topic, but on Lake Wilson right now is just a huge homeless encampment,
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
But, Lopaka, I'm interested. Maybe we can take a step back. How did you get into all of this, and where did this interest come from? Was it there from the beginning, or was there a certain point in your life that was like, oh, wow, I'm really interested in this stuff?
It was something I was born with. I was adopted when I was 3 months old by a Catholic Portuguese family. And my biological mother had to give me up because, she had 4 of us, couldn't care for everyone. She was living in a Oldsmobile station wagon behind what is now Ayala's in Kalihi. And I started having kidney problems. And so the long and short of it is I actually died on the operating table because, speaking of the original Coca-Cola, this 11-year-old kid from Makiki snuck in a couple bottles of Coke, so we snuck down the stairs, and so especially me with my kidney condition, it got bad.
No, man.
While I was on the operating table, I remember my adopted grandmother kind of like standing here, and then this kid that was next to me in the room I was in at the old children's hospital was standing here. His name was Scotty Boyd, and there was somebody just beyond the light who was kind of like the judge of what was going on, but basically they were petitioning to see if I live or if I die. And whoever that was standing just in the darkness, said, maybe he should live. And my adopted grandmother said, it's life, I will see him through it. And right after that happened is, when I started hearing and seeing stuff. Wow. And, I became a teenager, went away to the mainland, get off the rock fever. And I was in Orlando, Florida, sowing my wild oats. And I got a call from my mom, and she says, would you mind coming home, because there's things I tried to pass on to your brother, but he's not interested, and your sister just got pregnant. So I'm like, oh man, I don't know, because I'm working and having a fun time, and my mom hangs up. She says, okay, don't worry about it. And before she hangs up, I hear her say, I could die tomorrow.
Oh, shit.
So I called her back. I'm like, wait, what is it? She goes, come home. There's 2 years maybe of things that your auntie and I have to teach you, and it was a 2-year period. But
It's hard to say no to that.
yeah, well, what I didn't realize is my mom only had 2 years to live.
shit.
So after that was over is when she passed. And then I met Glenn Grant, and everything I heard him say on this tour that I went on was everything I'd practically learned from my mom and my aunt. And so Glenn's big thing was it's not just storytelling. There's lots of study, lots of documentation. You have to have factual things to back up what you say, even though it's a legend. Or you have to be able to put it across to people so they can relate to it.
Sure.
And he was a taskmaster, and that's why I called him my Jewish father. So I'd always ask him, how's that? Was that good? He's like, it's all right.
And it was important for Glenn to pass it on to somebody that was local.
That's what he said, actually. That's
Yeah.
what he actually said. I thought it was going to be my cousin Keone Nunes, but
Oh, that's your cousin.
Yeah.
Oh, I never knew that. Oh,
All
right
this
on.
stuff,
Yeah,
yeah.
there you go.
But
supposed
there was
to
a
be a
book
Catholic.
signing in the old store, and he said, finally I have a Hawaiian who can do this. And I'm like, wow, I mean, who is it? Big responsibility.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, he also collected a lot of ghost stories that had to do with a lot of these old crime cases. And it's funny about that book, because he told me a story, something about Rodney
Sunny
Ching.
skies.
Yeah, and something about Larry Mayhow and Danny Noy. And I'm like, should I even be hearing this? And I can't name the person, but when Glenn was saying this to me, the person in the story was standing there. And Glenn said, it's not Larry Mayhow who's the godfather of organized crime. He said, it's absolutely not him. And the guy who was standing next to my boss sort of leaned in front of him, and he said, and we don't know if this is true, it says neither confirm or deny, but he said it's actually Dan Inouye.
I just heard that a few days ago
Yeah.
from a coworker. I was telling Sean.
Yeah.
Ironically, I have a coworker who's probably watching right now, and his Charlie, forgive me if I butcher this, but his dad knows, or actually family members, I guess, with a lot of what maybe some of the guys in this book, you know, and his dad didn't follow that line, right? But it was such a huge coincidence, you know, that I'm just kind of, I've been working with this guy for almost 10 years now, you know, and I didn't know any of this, but of course only now I'm kind of getting into the whole crime in Hawaii. It's so fascinating, you know. I'm curious to know, you know, back in the 70s and the 60s, you know, I guess all the way up to the 90s, the crime was real deep with the so-called mob or whatever.
It was nuts.
Yeah, I'm interested to know.
Well, even in Las Vegas, you know, the residents said when the mob ran Las Vegas, there was no crime. You could leave your front door open.
Yep.
You know, nobody would rob you. But once they got rid of the mob, things went crazy.
Yep. Created a vacuum almost.
Yeah.
Power struggle and turf war.
Yeah, I'm curious, Lopaka. So from the time you picked up this ability, or the time that you understood you had it as a child, right? You left home, you went to Orlando, you said it was, and then from the time you came back home, in that long period, I guess, did you do anything with your talent? Maybe talent is not the best word to characterize it as,
Yeah.
but your ability.
I'm the worst person to ask about myself because there's certain things I don't like to talk about. But after that, I really didn't know what to do with what I learned and what it was for. Until my cousin Keone Nunes, you know, gave me this, and he said part of it has to do with a Kahuna practice and a Kahuna lineage, and that's when everything opened up. And like, son of a bitch, damn it.
Yeah.
And it sounds kind of weird, but you know, we're talking about crime and punishment in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s in Hawaii. I remember hearing hearsay, rumors that as well as an organized crime family or unit that was running things, there was also an underground group of men that these figureheads would go to see to put curses on people. You know,
Wow.
because they were too much in the public eye. They couldn't have certain things associated with them. That's paranoia.
That's really
Yeah.
similar to the mafia, or the Italian mafia, because they had it wasn't like curses or something, but like, you know, to get into the mafia, you have to do a religious ceremony.
Yeah.
It's similar, right? It's like it's so counterintuitive to believe that, like, you know, these spirits will help you or aid you in your criminal pursuits, or your pursuits to hurt other people. But
Right.
it's very that's another parallel. It's interesting.
Even Manuel Noriega was consulting voodoo priests and seers and prophets.
Right.
You know, and they said things went wrong for him the one time he decided not to pay attention to the prophecy and did something else.
Wow.
You know, that was his downfall.
This might be a stupid question, but you kind of alluded to this. You know, there's Hawaii and then there's the mainland. Is there a difference between Hawaiian ghosts and mainland ghosts?
I want to say for Hawaiian ghosts, Asian ghosts, the difference is that, and I can't speak for every single Hawaiian or Asian person, but largely we were not afraid of ghosts because a lot of times it was a member of your own family.
Yeah.
Like in Samoa, they bury the family around the house.
Yeah.
You know, in Hawaii, they bury it underneath the house or in a secret place where only they know it's at. And especially in Japanese culture, you know, they kept certain aspects of the family close. There was a practice called thinning, where if you were poor and you had too many kids, the thinning method was to get rid of the youngest one for the sake of the family to be able to survive. But that youngest one they kept in a corner of what we would call today a garage underneath the Japanese version of an anvil. And I remember growing up toward the end of the plantation times and going to my neighbor's house over here in Waipahu and seeing this same anvil in the corner of their garage. And so that practice actually came over from Japan, you know, during the plantation era. So a lot of times our ghosts here are family members and we're not afraid of them. But as for the continental United States, it's just a whole slew of different kinds of ghosts. And a lot of times when these people experience these ghosts, they're not connected to them. You know.
It's so interesting to me. No, I was just listening to you, and like it's so interesting too. Like it's the reconciliation of, like, especially on the mainland, right? There's the Judeo-Christian beliefs, right, of God, hell, heaven, whatever, and there's no real discussion of ghosts or whatever in the Judeo-Christian doctrine or dogmas. Yet they still have this this superficial, or not supernatural connection to things that seem to be so outside of it. Whereas in Hawaii, like our religion kind of, or the whole Native Hawaiian religion kind of incorporated the spirits as like tools to consult and tools to for advice and things of that nature.
Well, even possession is different here. In the Catholic religion, it's a demonic possession, but in Hawaii and in Asia, do you guys ever see that movie Shudder?
Yes.
Okay, and
It was a couple of years ago.
remember how the movie ended?
Was that the one? It was more of a psychological thriller.
Yeah,
Shudder?
and the ghost of the girl that was killed keeps appearing in all the pictures.
Yeah.
But if you remember,
Oh yeah, that's right. Yep.
Shutter.
Shudder.
S-H-U-T-T-O.
Yeah, Shudder. Yeah.
but at the end,
Because it's a picture.
and I'm sorry to give it away, but yeah, at the end, the last picture that's taken from the guy's own camera
yeah.
across the room is that girl that killed herself, or he helped kill. The reason he's been having these neck problems throughout the whole film is she's been sitting on his shoulders the whole time.
Yeah.
That's the way you get possessed in Asia. That's the way you get possessed in Polynesia. They sit on you.
Yeah.
And in certain Hawaiian families, there is a certain member that was chosen as what they call the haka, or the medium. And that was the person who was trained to receive the ancestral deity to sit on them and communicate to the family through that person.
So, okay, but that's also like the not to be the skeptic guy here.
No,
'cause
not at all.
I've had sleep paralysis. I've had that. I've like had the choking ghost, as the kanashibari. I don't know how how it's pronounced. I've had that, and it was terrifying. I had that for a stretch, man. And then I started like reading about the phenomena of sleep paralysis and lucid dreaming and stuff like that. And I started like lucid dreaming because I started reading about it while being in this sleep paralysis state. And it made me like, and of course it never really happened again once I, started reading about it and understanding it through like a quote unquote scientific perspective. And I'm wondering, like, what's the reconciliation between the scientific explanation and the, like the
Paranormal.
the paranormal, the paranormal possession.
Actually, both reasons are very similar. A lot of times a person is working so hard and has so much stress in their life that even when they're trying to fall asleep, they can't. And so a lot of times they actually are sleeping, but their body's awake. And so they have this sensation of being sat on or being choked, kanashibari, noho akua. The difference is when you come out of it, in the paranormal or spiritual sense, is a lot of people have bruised finger marks around their throat, or hand marks here in the chest, like somebody was actually sitting on them and literally pressing them down into the bed. In the Japanese culture, that affects one person in every family, every other generation. So it never bothers an entire family. It's just the one person for some reason.
That's interesting. That's crazy.
I'm glad you brought it up because I'm actually I don't. You see, I don't even want to talk about it now, but I get sleep paralysis a lot. I haven't had it in quite a while, and maybe it kind of goes back to the religious tie I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a very loose connection. But I'm like you, so I looked up sort of the scientific reasoning behind it, where you get stuck in that REM state of sleep. The thing I struggle with is that when I get stuck in that so-called state, if it's purely a scientific reasoning, why is it always negative? Because what I see, negative meaning, I see what do you want to call it, a creature, a man standing in the corner, right? I'm paralyzed, and basically my body is awake or something or other. I can't explain beyond that, but the figure comes up to me, and it's scary as shit. And I've been through it a million times. It never gets any less scary the next time around. At one point in my life, a few years back, I was fucking terrified to go to bed, and that's, I'm not shitting you.
Well, another thing too is like, if it is, with the scientific reasoning, it's interesting that across all cultures, they see the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's in
It's
every
like
culture.
it's not like a different figure or a different creature or a different thing for everybody across all cultures all around the world. It's the same figure that's sitting on top of you, usually a lady. And
Well,
she's
the same
choking
few
you.
things.
The same
but-
few things. There's a couple things. Obviously, yours
Right.
is different. I've heard that too.
Yeah.
I've heard the guy
It's
standing in the
fucking
corner
scary.
and coming up. Yeah. But the lady sitting on your chest, that's
That's probably the
Definitely.
most common, I
that's
think.
the most common. Lady in black. Or
In
something
Japan,
like that.
I don't know. I was just thinking it was a funny joke. Like, if it'd be a good alibi for a dude who gets mad at his wife all the time, he chokes the hell out of his wife. Like, no, like she's like, no, she's abusing me. Like, no, she is the medium for the family, and she's been receiving the choking ghost. Swear to God, but she doesn't listen when I tell her to iron my shirts.
There's a lot of things that like well, actually, you can if you want to respond to his figure, and if you have any insight into some of that, that'd be interesting.
Logically, a lot of psychologists say it's the manifestation of your own fear or your own anxiety, like things you haven't dealt with or things that are really bothering you.
Yeah.
Internally that you don't really think about during your waking hours, but the second you get home and you're by yourself, it just, starts to come back. That's the logical explanation. It also has been attributed to religious persecution. And again, the issue with people who discover they have the gift of psychometry or telepathy or PK or what we call telekinesis. I have a friend who realized that he was a psychic medium, and his Korean mother decided that he was demonically possessed and forced him to go to a church that they were not a member of to have an exorcism performed. And
Wow.
she got mad because the Catholic priest told her, well, he's not Catholic, number one, and number two, according to the rules of the Vatican, I can't perform an exorcism unless the victim wants it.
Yeah, you can't. You have to have
Yeah, and
the
so
free will of the person.
I talked to him and I said, listen, here's what's going on. Here's what you are, and you're not crazy. You're not going to go to hell. There's no religious persecution or aspirations, connected to this. It's just a natural function of, the human biology. And so that actually sort of helped him feel better about himself, because when I met him, he was, really overweight. But, that self-confidence actually helped him, to become a lot more healthier. And so, especially here in Hawaii, because of the plantation era, the influence of so many different ethnicities, we've had superstition assigned to certain beliefs and certain sort of ghosts that doesn't allow us to look at it in a more scientific, academic way. It's always something bad. And that's what I do to help young people. Some people have psychic abilities they haven't dealt with. The family persecutes them, and they end up becoming drug addicts. Abuse alcohol, become abusive themselves. And there's a young girl who had the gift of psychometry. She could touch things and get impressions from it and tell you who it belonged to. And what happened to the ring, you gave them. And her boyfriend, excuse my language, but her boyfriend was a dick about it because he realized she had this ability and was jealous. And, and suddenly he started to tell, no, you're stupid. You're an idiot. That's why. You're worthless.
That's heavy.
Yeah. And so,
That's so dumb.
without the support of family and loved ones, it actually becomes something really bad for these people.
And you start, I'm sure people with psychic or medium type of abilities, I'm sure they get PTSD from the things they're seeing at a young age, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If you saw dead people all the time walking around or whatever you see, some scary shit, I'm sure it's got to cause some mental trauma.
I mean, that courtroom museum at the Iolani every time I've done a tour in there, I don't know why, every time I walk into that room, like, all the bells are ringing. Every case that used to be tried there is still there.
Right.
All the people involved in the case. There was a woman on the last Massey ghost thing we did in there that was running a digital recorder, and she played it back, and we all heard this man's voice whisper the name Nunny, which happened to be her name. And she said, my grandfather was one of the detectives on the Massey trial. He worked for the Pinkerton Detective Agency. And I forget the last name, and she said he spent a considerable amount of time on that case. And she remembers him telling her about it as a kid, and she didn't really understand it. She was too young, and it was the first time she'd been in that courtroom. You know, and she said all of a sudden it just all came back, and then his voice, what she claims was his voice, shows up on this digital recorder calling her by, you know, his pet name for her,
Right.
which nobody else called her.
So I'm interested to know, for somebody who says that ghosts, paranormal activity, psycho, whatever it is, you just, this big huge word that I can't comprehend. There's a lot of people who just don't believe it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's, I don't want to say it's justified, you know, some people don't understand it. But what do you tell these people? I mean, do you try to convince them that it's real, or do you just kind of let them go on about their day?
I do my best to explain to them what it is, and then I just leave it up to them, because I can't tell them what to say or think or feel. You know, and some people accept it readily, some people it takes a little while, and some people I never hear from again. You know, so as best as possible, I don't come off as condescending and all-knowing. It's just real, bare, basic way of helping them realize, you know, well, you have telekinesis. You know, this is why things are moving around, because you stress out, and the stress is actually bursting out like energy, and it's making your coffee cup move across the counter.
So people seek you out so they understand they possibly have some of these abilities.
Possibly. Mostly I get calls from the state buildings downtown Honolulu, and it's always, you know, state workers. Hey, how do I curse somebody and never work with
By not giving me my freaking overtime.
yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
For real.
No, for sure.
I've been told too many people about this. Well, people know that my mom passed about 6 months ago, right? So usually I have dreams quite often. Once she passed, I stopped having all dreams. And I've been visited by her 3 times. Once while she was still in a coma. So she was in a coma, actually a year ago today. She fell into a coma after having congestive heart failure. And it was on Mother's Day. She had a cold, so we never went to go see her. She lives up Makakilo. She did live up Makakilo. And so she fell into a coma that night on Mother's Day. And then about 5 months later, she ended up making a decision none of us could. We couldn't pull the plug. We gave her every opportunity. She ended up passing in October of last year. So before she passed, my girlfriend at the time, her mom and my mom were really good friends. And so we were visiting Queens almost every day. We had somebody there. I was going there every single day, every night. There was a couple nights I didn't go, and I didn't know that my girlfriend's mom at the time went to go see my mom and hung out with her for a few hours. So she essentially told her, she had a conversation with her. So that night I had a dream, and it felt so real. It's like I felt like my body was like getting pulled, and then I'm there at the next scene, right? The next stage of my dream, and I see my mom in a wheelchair, and there's a little scene that happens, a little conversation back and forth, and then we get pulled, and we're walking at Disney Aulani. I've never been there. I have no clue what it looks like except from the outside driving past. And it's my mom, Alika Boy, and myself walking up, and there's like all of these bridges that go across this river that goes through, and there's a bunch of fish swimming. That's what I see in my dream. I don't know if that's true, but she goes, I think they're supposed to have a show today or something, and so she's talking to me, and I'm like, yeah, it looks kind of dead, like it's just kind of empty. And then she goes, you know what, let's get the whole family together, and let's go, we'll have lunch here at Disney Aulani, and then we'll go to Disneyland for a family reunion. And then I woke up, and I was like, oh, that's kind of strange. So come to find out, my girlfriend's mom was having that conversation with my mom at the time while she was in a coma, saying, Sonia, you gotta wake up. We'll go to, have lunch at Disney Aulani, and then we'll get the whole family together and have a reunion at Disneyland. So it was weird that the conversation I had in my dream, and I had no clue what she had said. So I haven't told too many people about that, but it was just some weird situation that happened, and I was like, Mom, however you did that, do it again. You can reach out to me anytime. You know.
I don't think it's weird at all.
No.
It just kind of.
Are you guys going to do it?
What's that?
The vacation?
Disneyland eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, once we.
I think that's the message.
It was just really interesting. And she died a few months after that. So
Yeah, that's just her mind is still working, even though her body's not,
right.
functioning. But the power
It's
of the
comforting.
mind, the power of the mind is so amazing that that's basically the explanation of parapsychology. It's the power of the human mind that survives the physical death of its own body.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and as a medical parallel, I think the biggest medical, I think the most effective medical phenomenon is that of placebo, right?
Yeah,
Any
yeah.
other medication, right? And so, a sugar pill, if someone tells you it's going to cure you, like, and you believe it with your heart and your mind fully, it has an effect, so that kind of ties into the...
No, you're absolutely right. There's a small group of people I'm just teaching right now the bare basics of spiritual stuff, and one of the things I told them, people are going to ask you eventually to do blessings and cleansings, and when you get there, you'll realize, they really don't need it, but what they're actually calling you for is, some sort of relief of their distress, comfort, so even your presence is like a placebo. That's what you're there for. I have one for you that I've been meaning to ask you. A couple of months ago, a guy called me, and he said he runs a drywall business, and he claims he's doing a house in Hawaii. And the guy had the Daruma images in his house, and the Chinese lion statues or the dog statues. And he said the owner was doing some religious stuff with incense and all this. So the long and short of it is he claims to have been possessed by the Japanese dog demon, the Inugami, that was possessing one of those statues.
The contractor says that to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so he says, I'm thinking about suing this guy. I'm like, well, what are you calling me for? He says, can you help identify that I'm actually possessed? So, if in case this goes to court, you can help me out.
That's a stretch, right?
I don't think that's an actionable basis to assert a claim. Like, even if what is he asserting? How is he damaged by this?
Well, his wife, he claims that his wife told him that, sometimes...
The answer is no, by the way, you can't.
Okay.
I'm just curious, as a thought experiment, like, what's...
Well, he says, my wife tells me that I act like a dog, and, I growl when we're having conversations, and she won't tell me until later, and apparently, claws grew out of my fingernails and all this stuff.
Wow.
Well, that just sounds like a normal man to me.
Yeah,
He only has sex
like a normal guy.
only has sex with
So I said, stop that role playing.
Seriously, I think that guy just kind of pulled the veil back on his own sex life.
Right.
Some weird,
I think so.
That's interesting, though.
I said I'm no attorney, I'm no lawyer or anything, but I don't think it's going to stand in court unless you can get the demon to appear and say, yeah, I knowingly possessed this guy.
Yeah, maybe he could trump up some BS allegations to justify some emotional distress claim, but it feels like watching him desecrate some animals or something in front of him, something left field like that maybe,
But yeah, it turns out that's this guy's MO. He'll go to your house to do drywall, and then he'll tell the owner, I think your house is haunted, and if you pay me X amount of dollars, I'll get rid of it for you.
That's insane.
How's that hustle going for him?
Yeah.
Yeah, it works on the stupid, but
Yeah.
he's not really that successful.
Yeah.
I guess on the technical level, is that fraud?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is. A fraud is a misrepresentation, a intentional misrepresentation, and I guess if you get money to induce someone to give you money, then yeah, it is fraud. Especially if it's completely unjustified, this, or unproven, or there's no evidence that could justify some sort of possession of the contractor himself.
Yeah.
Saying every wall I put up, I'm getting possessed, so you have to pay for it. It seems kind of ridiculous. But yeah, no. Maybe it is fraud, I guess. But I don't. That's only if you actually were to pay for him to be pay for him to be cured of his own possession, I guess, and you get that money back, I guess, in some way.
I mean, what an asshole,
Is that a tax credit?
Yeah, I mean, you're playing on people's fears, that's crazy.
That's life, though, man. That's all advertisement. That's all of advertising.
Right.
It's all of everything.
Right,
It's playing on
exactly.
your fears, right?
Right.
FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yep.
Oh, you gotta buy this. You're not gonna have a great of a time. It's your
Right.
best friend. You're not gonna, if you don't drink this beer, all that kind of stuff. Man.
Yeah.
It's FOMO, fear of everything.
Yeah, but at least most companies can put a commercial out on TV, and I'd like to see this particular individual make a commercial saying, "Hey, I'll fix your wall and and exercise your house as well while I'm at it.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy.
That's why when people call me for help, the first thing they ask is, what's your fee? I'm like, there's no fee. It's up to you. If you want to give something, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine too. It's no worry.
Do you curse them if they don't give you?
Yeah. Well, I got kids and grandkids now, so I can't cross that line anymore.
Yeah.
Ex-in-laws and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's really cool. You providing a service that I guess some people really need that service. Whether or not they have the money, I guess.
Yeah, and largely it's just people who just want to be heard.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. There's one poor guy who, his wife said the house was haunted and she was being possessed, and he said everybody he went to, it didn't work, didn't help out, nothing would help his wife. And I asked, did you have to pay these people? Did they tell you they had a fee? He said, oh yeah, the lowest fee was this Hawaiian kahuna woman, $600, and the other guy was $3,000.
Oh my God,
the bowl of
yeah.
rice by the lake, and like, what?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a testament.
insane.
Yeah, it's a testament to your. I'm happy. Like, I'm really stoked that you work on a honor basis. If you pay me what you think I'm worth, type of thing. I like that. That's very cool.
Well, because if I do it any other way, my mom's gonna come out of the grave and we're naked children. But that was the emphasis. The second it becomes about money, you lose your gift, because it's about people.
Yeah.
I can completely relate to
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're fishermen, and not so much here recently, but we love to dive and fish.
He's
And
been my dive partner for 10 years now, something like that, give or take.
Yeah.
Or a little less, yeah.
yeah, so it's so easy on a good day, you catch a bunch of fish to go and sell it. But I've done that a few times. I just never got any enjoyment out of it. Never really needed the money, I guess. So
Yeah.
I'm one of those guys. I say the story all the time. I can just go in the water and just swim around, and it makes a huge difference. It's really, it's a testament to how much I enjoy the sport, and it's a equivalent parallel, I guess, for you.
Well, this guy was talking about it. Come to find out, he showed me the wife's meditation room, and there's all these different religious stuff around the room. And in this one corner is this life-size picture of this Middle Eastern-looking gentleman. No disparagement, not about anybody's ethnicity, but he's dressed in the John Travolta, white suit, and it sort of like stood out with everything else. And I asked him. I said, "Who is that?" "Well, that's my wife's guru. She goes twice a week, every month, to go see him in Encino, and they have a one-on-one."
Oh man.
So I'm like,
terrible.
your wife she's not possessed. He's like, no. I'm like, no, yes.
Yeah, have you seen that documentary on Netflix called like Wild Wild Country? Or it's like a serious documentary. It's about the Osho cult in Washington State.
Oh, no.
Very similar. Osho was like a guru, the same thing. He had like 10
Just
Rolls
saw it.
Royces.
Huh.
Yeah, it's amazing, and like he would definitely like do the same thing. He was just
Yeah, I think it was Oregon, the desert in Oregon, right? The guru came from India, whatever. I think
I did hear about that guy.
ultimately,
free love guy. Yeah, so
Yeah.
ultimately, they tried to control the town they were in, and since their hippie principles weren't accepted by the surrounding rednecks, there was like a conflict, and they tried to control the state legislature by manipulating the votes. And long story short, they this is all public record. They poisoned. They poisoned all the salad bars like around, so everyone got sick, so they couldn't vote.
Right.
But, yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, it's crazy.
you should check it out. It's actually really interesting.
Yeah.
I was watching this documentary about Brother 13, I think it was. There was some mainland cult, and he ended up taking a bunch of money from everybody, but they lived on this little island. And while he was in court, and this is public record as well, while he's being sentenced for fraud and taking money from the people that were paying him as like a tithing kind of thing, the judge ended up dying right there in court as he was being sentenced, and so they thought he had some kind of special crazy power. And it's public record, and I think it's Brother 13, Brother 12, something like that. I gotta look it up again, but yeah, it's a crazy
God, I love
documentary.
Netflix. That's my vice, man.
Bro, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I have to try to ban Netflix during my semesters because it'll jack me up so much.
In this capacity, this field, especially with what you do, what you guys do, when people are willing to expose themselves emotionally to you for help, it's so easy to take advantage of that, and take them for money or whatever else.
Yeah.
But that's the line between integrity and debauchery.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was getting a divorce, and the attorney who was handling it, wanted to date her.
Oh, what?
Yeah. And she's like, "What?"
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
That's a violation of that.
Well, that happens a lot with therapists, right?
Yeah.
Therapists, people fall in love with their therapists all the time because they're the ones listening to them, solving the problems, helping them out, talking to them.
Personal trainers too, man.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
All those one-on-one times.
We
man.
could name names.
Right?
We got some
But
stories
do
to
you
tell.
have that? Do you have any clients that start to make
Make a move on me.
an attachment or anything?
Well, there is one, but it's the way what I do is different. Like specifically, what I do now is insurance defense. So like my client, I don't it's you get a claim and all sorts of things, but it's not really the money of the person that's at stake. It's like the insurance companies do the policy and stuff. But there is one client that is like very needy and like she emails the hell out of me, but. She's a total lesbian, so it's not because she's like has like a partner, a life partner. So and so it's not like a romantic thing. It's just I think she's more. It's an anxiety thing, and like it's like the more I can contact you and control you, like I can control my anxiety over like some issue in my life, and I think that's more what it is. But with you, I can see you having kind of like a cult-like following with, honestly, because like there is like it's like kind of like an access to a truth or like it's specialized.
It's like a therapist.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
in a sense.
Yeah, I could see people doing that more to you than to me. Like tell me like wanting to like get in your good graces to get maybe bestowed a gift that they may or may not have.
Before I met my wife, it was pretty bad. I'd come home at 3 a.m. My old apartment on Date Street. There'd be people sitting in front of my door.
Hashtag Kahuna groupies.
At one point, I had a lot of goth people that would show up in zippies after the tour, and I'm sitting there eating, and they're all like standing right here. As I'm trying to eat my chili, I'm like, what do you think? One woman said she was skilled in different type of massage and wanted to massage the demon out of me.
Oh, that's some freaky stuff, man.
So I finally told Glenn Grant about it. He's like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. Yeah, it's probably going to happen to you because apparently he had a stalker who. One of the stories in his book was about a woman who stabbed him with a pair of scissors, and he showed me the mark from it. And he said there was another woman who showed up at his office dressed like Morticia Adams and told him, I think we should meet my parents, before we get married.
Oh, shit.
Wow.
Yeah.
But now,
Stage 5 cleaner.
since I've been married, my wife manages the business. She comes on the tours, and there's a few times where I just happen to mention, my wife Tanya, and there's particular women on the tour who like just start staring daggers into her. And some women will sit behind my wife and kick her chair,
No shit.
in the bus. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I feel horrible
That's crazy.
about it. Yeah, but that's something I've never taken advantage of because for some reason I think my mom comes from the other side and yanks my ear, because I start to think about the consequences.
Right.
Because
It's like with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Like that's Superman or like Batman. Or something.
That'd be like the comment.
not any crazy messages at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
This is completely random, but I just noticed your shirt. You got the Beetlejuice shirt on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's
very
awesome,
appropriate
dude.
for today's
That's
podcast. I love
That's
that
sick.
movie.
Yeah, my wife buys me all these cool shirts from the 80s and the 70s, so I got a couple of Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Swap meet.
Yeah. That's dope. Now, to take it back a little bit, but we can kind of go into both, because I have a question for you about what I'm about to ask. I got a question for you. Same. The eruption on Big Island.
Crazy.
Crazy, right? Question for you is, there's a bunch of issues with lava and fire insurance and the fight going back and forth.
Right.
What is your perspective on what's going on?
I think they settled this. Don't quote me on this.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's covered if the fire does not, if the lava doesn't touch the item that it burns, but the proximity of it always ignites the
Sure.
the item. So I'm pretty sure that it is covered.
Because it was like the lava that was reaching the house but wasn't touching it, and then it caused a fire. So the house went up in flames, and they were like, "Oh, lava insurance doesn't cover that. It's fire insurance,
Yeah,
right?"
fire insurance, because like it's the ignition, but the heat from the lava can be felt like feet away, right? And I've never been close to lava, so I don't know what it's like, but I'm sure stuff will ignite before, and I think that's I think because of that phenomenon, it's covered. But like, I haven't ever had any cases yet, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
And then with you, with Pele, right? So, what's your thought on the whole eruption and what's going on?
I'll say this. Catherine Toth, I think she's one of the writers for Honolulu Magazine. I met her way back in 2005. And she told me this story that she was actually going to study volcanology. And so they were up at Kilauea with other volcanologists and scientists. And she said one was from Germany, the other was from another place, and then the rest were Americans. And in this VW van, they drove somewhere at Kalapana, and they could see Kilauea, and they all got out of the van, and they said this huge white orb came out of the crater and shot straight down to where they were at, went right around the van and went inside this abandoned car. Just started going shh. And so they jumped in the van and they're freaked out, and they're watching this go on, and they hear a knock on the driver's side door, and they turn around and they're like, ah! They said it's a very tall Hawaiian man, curly hair and a beard. He's wearing like a windbreaker and shorts. And he tapped on the window and he asked the guy who was driving, is everything okay? And the guy says, yeah, we're fine. Then she says she turns to the guy from Germany. The old man, Hawaiian guy, turns to the guy from Germany and speaks to him in German fluently, and speaks to that other person in whatever that language was. And she says, they're losing it. And then there's a knock on the passenger side window, and they look out, and it's an old Hawaiian woman in a white dress with white hair and a dead lay on her head. And she looks at them and she says, it's time to go. And the van started up by itself.
Wow.
And she said, we're all scientific people, forward-thinking, logical. We don't believe in this kind of thing, but, they couldn't explain it.
Yeah.
The other thing is, this past October, I went to the Big Island because past 3 years I've been going to KMC Camp Theater to tell ghost stories. Met a guy in a restaurant in Hilo, and he told me as a kid, I don't know if the food place is still up there in Kalapana, but he said every time the woman who owned the place would come to the window and give him a plate of food, she was always tell him, go give this to Pele. She's sitting over there. And, he thought it was just some Hawaiian woman named Pele, so he'd always walk over and give her the food. And he said this went on for a while, and finally he asked her, he's like, why do we always give this food to that woman and she never pays? And the owner said, that's because that's Pele. He's like, Pele, that's her name. And no, that's actually Pele, the goddess Pele. He's like, what? She said, never mind, just go give her the food. And he turned around and walked to her table to give her the food, and she left. He said the place is so open that you can't really see anyone going anywhere no one can leave without you seeing them going.
Right.
Right? Such a big area. And he kind of freaked out, and the owner said, I told you, that's Pele. And she says, come, I'll show you something. And she showed him the old lava flow and told him when the lava was coming through there, and he saw it himself, he said it was coming, it came toward the restaurant, it went around it, sort of like this, and the lava flow turned around and went back up.
Oh, wow.
And around the restaurant this way, and then came down.
Oh, wow.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And she says Pele protects this place, so we're not worried about, lava flows.
Sure.
And so the next time we go up there, he's going to take us to see the actual flow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
There's a few stories like that. Of course, because of the eruption on the Big Island, everybody's talking about it as we are here. Mm-hmm. My wife's, one of my wife's best friends, I just sent her a text message to send me the link. I don't know the lady's name, but this particular lady passed away. She was in one of the lava zones back in the 80s. And she and her kids or grandkids or whatever, they knew the lava was coming. The government tried to get them out of there. They weren't leaving. And the lady said, clean up, clean the house, clean up, right? Keep it clean. And her kids or grandkids or whatever was wondering, like, what the hell are you thinking, And she was just calm, collected the whole time. She was not leaving. And she said, don't worry, just clean the house. And the lava was within feet, or within a very close proximity of the home. and the lady, and this is recorded. This is the truth. The lady was outside sweeping her porch, and the lava, I don't know if it stopped or went around the home. It was one of the few homes left in that particular zone, and she went back several years later after they were allowed to go back in and live the rest of her life in that home with lava surrounding the home. It was amazing.
That's the thing. You're supposed to sweep and open the doors. I think front and back or something like that.
Yeah, very interesting.
What is the, if you don't mind me asking, real quick, what is the most haunted place in the state of Hawaii as far as like the Hawaiian supernatural phenomenon is concerned?
If you're talking about condominiums, it's the Contessa.
The Contessa, or like just place in locations in the state, not just.
Oh, you mean a particular location or like a neighborhood?
Any, I'm just curious. You know?
Oh, I don't know if you actually want to go there, but it's and people who are listening, please don't go to this place. Just because I said please, it's not worth it. It's the cave in Waianae.
The cave in Waianae?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been.
What is
there.
that? Mermaid cave?
No, it's right off the. There's like a lookout, scenic point right across. Yeah, you walk in there. I've been in there.
Yeah, that's the place that plays off of people's energies and issues. And I think tonight is either the third or the last night of the series of Night Marcher nights, Kanelo no Mauli Muku. So I think tonight is Mauli, if not mistaken. This is the moon phase where spirits are allowed to roam the earth. And so if you want ocular proof, that would be the place to go.
Oh, wow. So tonight, would you see night marches there likely in that?
Yeah, in that area. It's pretty active those last few nights.
I know where I'm not going tonight.
What about Kauai? Kauai, like it's always been interesting. Like, I just came back there from work, and like I learned that it was the only island that was never conquered by Kamehameha. It was like it kind of has its own thing going on, its own lore and its own mythologies, right? I was wondering what if you had any stories about Kauai in relation to Hawaii.
Yeah, so if my aunties on Kauai are listening, e hui kalamai, ka'anali kia na vau kia mo'olelo me kia kane. I would say start off with the tree tunnel.
Tree tunnel?
Yeah, and anywhere in, they call it Maha'ulepu, sort of near where the tree tunnel is. That's where they say a large part of Kamehameha's warriors were killed in that area, and their bones were left in those sand dunes. And part of those bones in the sand dunes were used to build a hotel.
Oh, wow.
Shit.
Yeah, and they had all kinds of problems. People were getting killed in the job site, and they kept trying to build a hotel with the bones in the concrete.
It comprised the sediment.
Yeah, and then Hurricane Eva came, and the first thing it took was that hotel.
Wow.
Oh, shit.
Right into the ocean. So start off over there.
Circle back.
Circle back.
The cave in Waianae, I think one of the stories, I'm sure there's several stories on what it means in Hawaiian history, but I think one of the meanings is that's the origination of, I guess, man or something like that.
Oh, Kaneana, the cave of the god Kane. But originally, that area was underwater, so it's actually an underwater sea cave. And the lava tube that's all, piled up now with rocks went out to the ocean. And so that's how they said the shark gods would swim into the cave. But, go check it out.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'm in that area fairly often. I've never stopped. I'm aware of the significance and to the Hawaiians and such. I wouldn't say that I've experienced or felt any sort of paranormal activity passing by or anything, but I'm definitely interested in going there on the historical aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I guess I would assume that if you go there, and I don't know how to express this, right? But if you go there looking for something to happen, what maybe something will, maybe not in a positive light.
Well, especially with places like that, it's all based on intent.
Yeah.
What your intent is in going into that place.
And it goes back to the placebo effect, I think, a little bit too.
Yeah.
Is like, if you try hard enough, you can find anything in any whatever you're looking at, you can find the answer you're looking for.
And never underestimate the power of the mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
I hear stories all the time about, bringing the lava rock home or bringing the bamboo from the forest. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, I experienced, I had a friend a long time ago, I haven't spoke to him in a while, but he had a crazy story, and maybe he was just a good storyteller, I kind of believed him, but the basic gist of the story was he or a friend brought the bamboo back to his place, and it was crazy haunted, and once they got rid of it, it went away.
Culturally and spiritually, it's pretty simple. You can take the lava rock from the volcano, and you can take the bamboo from the forest. You just have to ask. And it seems kind of stupid asking permission from something that you can't see, but that's a protocol and respect. All you have to do is ask.
Well, like us, when we take, the plants, when we go diving, we take the wax leaf, like our goggles. I always ask,
Yeah. And do you throw one back
Yeah.
when you can?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always do that.
I think for me, I mean, I
Just a
don't
respect thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily do that, but I just think that you mentioned intent, and my intent in the water is generally very respectful,
Yep.
and I don't need to come out of the water with fish. I know we talk about fishing or whatever,
That's
but
another thing, yeah. It's a pride
yeah, there's
thing.
huge cultural ties, right, to fishing here, and obviously in Hawaii.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, I'm just super respectful just because I love being in that environment, and I think that when you're in that environment, you're vulnerable. Tiger shark come up behind you anytime and fucking wrap your leg, right? But it's just that feeling of vulnerability that keeps me anyway respectful. And
And even the power of the waves and stuff like that, the tides.
yeah, so I think
Everything is, we're small in that environment.
and this type of psychological aspect that we use in the fishing and diving sense probably applies similarly to paranormal, right?
Yeah. I mean, fish in the water can feel vibrations from a human being, whether it be fear or whatever. My cousin was spearfishing off of Waikiki one night, and he told me later, I didn't realize that I actually caught too much. And he didn't give one back, and he started swimming back to shore. And he said this tiger shark just gently came up to his catch and wrapped its mouth around it and just took it. And didn't even yank it off of him, and he was like, okay, it's all yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like you were talking about, there's a pride thing with some of these younger kids that feel like they have to come back with a fish, whether it's a few inches of a manini or whatever.
God, I hate that.
Yeah, it's just like they're taking stuff that's like way below size limits,
Yeah.
and just to say that they came back with something, And so, me and Nate here, we've always been about preservation and
Oh, that's awesome.
the continuation of further generations
Yeah.
after us.
That's why my parents used to scold me. Oh, you're not going to leave for your brother, or
Yeah.
anything for tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I got one for you.
Oh, good.
Sorry to change subject.
Oh,
When I was teaching school, one of the parents was a prosecuting attorney, and he said he was involved in the Byron Uesugi case.
Okay.
It's-
He's the guy who went crazy, and he.
Yeah.
What is the story again?
He killed 7 employees, fellow employees at Xerox.
Right. Okay. Got it.
So he told me that he actually had to pull himself off of the case and was considering closing his practice because after talking to Brian Uesugi at length, he started having these really bad nightmares that he couldn't remember. And he said it got to the point where after having to talk with the guy, he didn't want to go home and sleep.
Wow.
And he said it was just something about the guy. He said, well, can you share, at least something that's okay to talk about? And he said one of the things Byron claimed was there's these dark shadows in the house that kept poking him in the back of the neck. That's why they found these knife marks all over the kitchen. And so this guy says, they interviewed a couple of the neighbors, and the neighbors said, oh, did Byron tell you about the shadow poking him in the neck? How did you know that? Oh, because the same thing happens in our house.
wow.
What?
Yeah. So he said after that, he had his last nightmare, and he said, yeah, I'm pulling myself off the case, and he said, if I ever get over this, I'm going to write a book about it.
So your loose understanding is that perhaps Byron Uesugi wasn't crazy, but he was perhaps possessed.
I can't really make a judgment on it. I'm just I can only relay what this person told me, but
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that at times that there are certain things you have to deal with in court where you're like, man, I'm done?
Not yet, man. Not yet, to be honest. Like, I'm still cutting my teeth. I'm not. I'm still like excited to work. I haven't been across any of those cases yet, and hopefully I don't, because I really do want to keep passionate about things. And if I went to sleep having nightmares about some shadow poking me in the neck or something, I definitely would not enjoy what I was doing.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. You guys are like conservationists, but you guys are hunters, right? That's like the whole counterintuitive thing. Back to your fishing stuff. It's weird, right? Like, the people that are responsible for bringing back like endangered species in Africa and stuff are actually the hunters and not the environmentalists, right? Because the hunters are the ones, because they represent money or the opportunity or the commerce. But in order to have that business, you have to make it sustainable, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I'd say that's kind of the basis. So I know you guys aren't aware, but I've started a non-profit foundation called Fishermen for Sustainability. It's basically paper. I just got Brother Jordan on as a director, so there's currently 3 directors. I still have room for more. Wink, wink. But really, that's what it's all about, because there's lots of conservation type of organizations out there. But coming, you got the perspective of being a fisherman. So, I think a lot of organizations, generally speaking, would say, you need to stop fishing, right? And that is the message from a lot of these organizations. You need to stop. Just stop what you're doing and let it regenerate. Well, that's not entirely true, right? It's not
a right answer either.
Exactly. It's about, your mindset when you're participating in that act or activity, right? We can still fish.
Yep.
But there's so many factors that you can easily think about, right?
Just go after the roy instead of some other stuff, because it's an invasive species.
Invasive species. Where are you fishing? You got Waianae has been devastated, absolutely devastated.
It's sad, bro.
It is really sad. You go diving out there, and it looks like fucking Iraqi desert in the ocean, right? And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, you still got your spots where there's fish and etc., but you have so much beach access, right? And you think about, okay, you got 2 or 3 guys diving at this one spot. Well, multiply that every day, let's say 12 hours a day times, do the math. It adds up, right? There's more fishermen taking fish out of the water than there is time for the fish to regenerate or to maintain sustainable levels. There's a lot of things you can do as a fisherman. You can still fish, I only need 2 uhus, to feed my family. And I know guys that, if he's watching, he probably, don't beat me up about this, but, so they go, I know we're way off topic, but they're really passionate about this, there's, the night fishing out here is big, right? Mm-hmm. These guys go out on boats, and they get a fucking T-bar about 6 feet long, and they fill it up with uhu, which is out there sleeping.
Yep. They're
sleeping in their cocoon, right, or whatever you call it, their mucus sac. Yep. And they just rape them, Well, this particular fish is, and all fish are, but this particular one is hugely important to the reef environment. And there is a very definite correlation that we see, basically the destruction of a lot of reef environments in Hawaii to the diminishing population of the parrotfish. Mm. So, and the Hawaii state laws, the DLNR, they're not enforcing the way they should be because they don't have the personnel.
And they only do a check like once every 10 years per spot.
It's crazy, there's a lot that can be done. So anyway, that's something that I would love to, in the near future, start to educate people on what they could be doing. I'm still trying to figure out the best way to do that.
Well, I mean, even talking about get with the marine biologists and try to get them involved with going to check the spots more frequently and turn it into kind of a university type program where they can participate that way.
Yeah, uses measurement.
Right.
Measure stuff.
And the state does that already, but the state does it once.
Like once every 10 years.
It's and maybe a little bit more frequent than that, but it's and it's hugely inaccurate because I got into this real in depth one time. They'll go to one spot, right, and whatever the time period is, let's call it 8 years, and they'll do a count. And it doesn't matter what time of the day, they'll do a count. This is the amount of fish. Well, we know fish are cyclical based on the time of year and whatever, the moon and this and that. So in theory, to be a little bit more scientific, you should be checking that same spot probably at least 10 times throughout the year. Well, that's a lot of work, right? We just don't have the resources to do that. I would love to, as an organization, to be able to support those efforts, right? But in a much more scientific way. And we got a long way to go before we get there, but I think the biggest thing is we actually need to start something, and that's what we've been talking about here recently.
Yeah, there's grants out there for that stuff, and you might even want to look into and doing some research, repairing some of the old fish ponds that were out here.
Yep.
Yeah,
You know.
I'd love to be part of that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so maybe getting back to topic here a little bit. Thanks for the question, though. I really appreciate that.
Well, that makes sense because I've run into hunters who've called me and said they did a couple of bonehead things. One Filipino kid said a bunch of them went to Molokai to hunt deer, and it was getting late in the afternoon, and he got tired, and he said he sat up against this boulder to get some shut-eye, and he said the boulder had this red dirt dot in the middle of it. And he said he's falling asleep, and all of a sudden he hears his friends calling him from a distance, or going, Jason, Jason. And he wakes up and looks like this, and they're across the other side of the valley, and they're standing in front of the big boulder with the red dirt dot in front of him, and he turns around like this, and he's leaning up against a tree. And I said, so what were you guys doing up there? You were hunting or something? He said, yeah, but we're being kind of stupid too. Just doing dumb things. He said, but I don't know how I ended up on the other side of the ridge, and my friends were over there where I was just, He said, do you think I'm cursed? I said, probably. And hunters have told me they've caught pig, and they're leaving, and all of a sudden there's just something that won't let them leave. It's almost like the path that they left the markers on were gone. Yeah. And so a couple of them realized, well, maybe this is not the pig, but my thing is you didn't leave an offering of thanks, for taking a life. You can't just keep taking the life of these pigs for sport. Yeah. You got to do something. In some respect, you have to leave something. Yeah.
Is there an alternative to, say, the offering, or so maybe a prayer, or just anything?
Yeah, anything with good intentions. Even a simple prayer is good. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate.
Mm-hmm. Gratitude, right?
Gratitude.
Yeah, just being grateful.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the whole fishing thing there. I'm interested in possession, and I don't know where to go with this because that could be a whole podcast in of itself, right? But
you want to save it for another podcast because it's a very
that'd be great. We would love for you to come back.
I'd love to have him there for it too.
For sure. Would you guys want to come back?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
let's schedule something.
Actually, another thing before we go, I guess because we kind of coming to the end, you were wanting to start a podcast too. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I do. Well, I was very interested in, because I'm a big fan of podcasts myself, and I stumbled across a few podcasts that I really liked, and they documented the stories of the underworld of various places. One was a Crime Town. One of my good friends turned me onto it, and it basically is a story of the crime and the mafia of Providence, Rhode Island, and how it got completely inundated into the political sphere, and how all these crazy stories emanated from that. And I was looking to maybe try to do something similar with that locally, because maybe the topic, cool. The idea is, everyone likes crime stuff. Everyone likes an anti-hero. Everyone wants to hear about that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And so I think it'd be a good avenue in Hawaii, especially because everyone's so close. Everyone's related. Everyone's cousins. Someone is someone there. You can get people coming in, and they can be open and honest about some crazy stories. Right. It'd be kind of cool to start off and jump off on a different. I'm sure you know a whole bunch of people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. with Mr. Daniel Inouye.
Yeah. Exactly.
No, what's weird though about Daniel Inouye? Like, didn't it come out that he was like a Harvey Weinstein guy too? Like, he came out like he was like molesting women and stuff too. Like, it was kind of crazy.
It's crazy because it's like that's some of the norm back then, and people got away with it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, back then it's crazy.
Yeah, well, no, well, I think like like back in the day, there's no video cameras and stuff
Right.
everywhere, so
Yeah, that was the ways of the past.
yeah, there's no
bit.
that was like kind of like the motivation to become a rich, powerful dude, right?
Yeah.
It's like I could like just
Yeah.
be a womanizer or
Yeah.
something, right?
I mean, that's the guy that was supposed to be the president in case something happened to the president.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's a very powerful guy, so it would make sense that he had a lot of influence
Yep.
yeah.
and a lot of ties.
Oh,
wasn't
sure.
wasn't his like one of the accusers his like hairdresser or something? Like,
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
he would get like these like really really long haircuts and like yeah, but he like didn't have much like
Yeah, he didn't have much
he
hair.
didn't have much hair, so he like
Massage
walk
the
up.
scalp.
Yeah, there'd be like his stylist was like his like one of his
I
like
gotta start
desired
researching.
But yeah, well, I appreciate you guys coming on.
No problem.
Thank
Of
you
course,
so
man.
much. I appreciate it.
Super fun, man.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
awesome.
Cool. We need all the subscribers we can get. Hit like, subscribe, check us back. We're gonna be getting back in the swing of things now that we took a few weeks off. So just let us know. All right, guys.
Aloha.
Thank you.
Shoot.
Right.
That was awesome.
That
That was fun.